All right, class. So it's me and Justin, and we're here to give you a little bit of a homework review. So I'm gonna talk little bit about problem two, about the unstable export markets, and then Justin will talk a little bit about buffer stocks. So the question two basically starts off with asking you about the economy of a developing country. In our case, it was Zambia. And they're basically saying that 56% of Zambia's total exports are dependent on copper. So that means if there's like this huge copper hype, obviously it's going to be very good for Zambia's economy. However, the other way around too, if there's like something has to do with the price of copper, that could be crucial for their economy because they're so dependent upon this one good. So in this scenario, in question number two, they're asking you, so a jewelry fad causes sudden increase in the global demand for copper, which basically means that the demand will shift to the right because there is this increase in the demand for copper, and will shift the demand curve to the right. However, on the left, this graph, you can see the demand and supply curves are very inelastic. Inelastic meaning it's very unresponsive to changes in price. An example is basically the price of cigarettes or gasoline, which if they increase, the demand still stays the same. People will still buy it, or insulin, because their life depends on it. And it's kind of like inelastic, like an I shape. That's how I like to remember the shape of the curve. And basically, if the demand shifts to the right, you can see that this new price of copper, so this should be the new demand, increases by, let's shift it a little more, like here, shifts to the right, and you can see the price changes by a lot. This is probably around $7. In the homework, I think it does it for you, if I'm not mistaken. So you don't actually have to calculate, you just have to shift the price. And now if we do the same shift with a very inelastic demand curve where the demand shifts to the right, and this should be basically the same change when you would compare this length with this length, the price would barely change. As you can see, I really took the extremes of this this shift just for demonstration. But here, this would be basically around here, which would be not even more than $6 in this case. So because they're very inelastic, changes in demand and supply basically affect the price way more than when these demand and supply curves are inelastic. So this is basically the whole problem. And also they start off at the same price of here $5, which is the shape. Now to question with the buffer stocks, Justin will say something. You guys?
Sorry, it was just on mute there for a second. So I did see that there was a little bit in some of the discussions, just kind of people wanting to talk about buffer stocks a little bit more. So the main idea of a buffer stock is, and this is from the textbook, is that it's a technique that's used for limiting commodity price swings by having a producers association or an international association buy and sell a commodity in large amounts. So the way I kind of explain this is in two ways. You can think of this as basically you start off with your main supply and demand graphs, right? And these kind of bounds, these dashed lines, are kind of like the bounds that say an international agency wants a price to stay in. Like they don't want a price to fluctuate too high, or they don't want a price to fluctuate too low, because if the price is too high, that hurts consumers, and if price is too low, that hurts producers. So what they can do is say, for instance, in the first example, say that there's an increase in demand for some sort of commodity, then the new intersection. So, our original point is where we have that S and D both in black. The original point is right there, but with the increase in demand, it becomes the new equilibrium price is higher than the targeted price, or it's higher than that bounded range. So basically, what these international agencies can do is produce a large amount of of the commodity, and then shift the supply curve, a new supply curve to the right. And in that final intersection, we see that it's between those two bounds. And the same thing, it's kind of just, if we're looking at it from a producer's perspective, say the supply curve shifts first, and now the equilibrium price is below our target price level. Um, what they can also do is they can buy a large amount of quantity of these goods. And so when that demand curve now shifts to the right, we get the Q prime and the S prime back at a at a price within our bounds. So basically, buffer stocks have their advantages. A well-run one can promote, excuse me, economic efficiency. So it's basically allowing you to sort of tame uh, prices where you want them to be. So that would be an advantage. But they do have a main problem, and it's that it's hard to find a stable target price that reflects long-term prices. And this is also from the textbook. So if the target price is set too low, buffer stocks will become depleted as the buffer stock manager sells the commodity on the open market in an attempt to hold market prices in line with the target price. If the price is set too high, on the other hand, the buffer stock manager must purchase large quantities of the commodity in an effort to support market prices. In addition to growing transportation expenses, insurance rates, and labor costs, as well as poor decisions by the buffer stock managers, contribute to the rising costs of holding the stocks. So basically, in essence, the problem with buffer stocks is that uh, in the long term, they don't reflect the market prices because you're basically trying to control where you want the price to be. And that can be very hard, in essence, with transportation expenses, insurance rates, and labor costs. So basically, those are the two. Those are some disadvantages that buffer stocks have, but they do a good job if they're run efficiently at stabilizing prices. So, in essence, in this little segment, the first one would be an advantage, and the other two ones would be disadvantages. So that's all I have to say. Um, and I guess then we're done. If you have any questions, just let us know.